So, as I said this morning, I'm speaking on emotional freedom part 2. And I just really love this subject because emotions are a part of us. They're such an important part of us. They're no less important than, say, our heart or our foot, right? Or our brain. They're a part of us. And I think in our spiritual journey, like, when we meditate, we feel a sense of who we are beyond the body and beyond the mind and beyond the emotional body, right? We feel God, we feel the goddess, we feel the absolute, we feel the divine. And when to know it fully is to merge into it, right? Is to be gone into it. So there's not even any sense of separate self. But, we also have this human journey, this human beingness, and so the emotions are a really unique part of it. And I'm really of the school of thought that we really honor this experience and form. We don't just try to get away and transcend it and get out of here. I think some of the Hindu teachings were, misinterpreted that we just want to get out of here. But Thich Nhat Hanh, I love his teachings because it's all about loving being here and loving everything here, and just being God, experiencing form, exploring in form, and creating in form, right? So emotional freedom, it's really about learning to live from our hearts, and really being able to cultivate the positive emotions and being able to take good care of, to witness, and to transform the negative emotions in ourselves and in others with skillfulness. So mindfulness training is being aware of what we're feeling at any given point in time and what's going on in our emotional body. Think about what you experienced so far today in your emotional body. Maybe you woke up and you were rested and so you're really happy, right? Or maybe you woke up and you didn't get enough sleep and so you're not that happy, you're tired. Or maybe your neighbor was leaf blowing at 7 a.m. Oh, I wish they'd ban those. And so you're irritable, or maybe you got out and sat on your deck and you listened to the bird song, and so you're just filled with this beautiful peace and love of life. There's so many ways we feel. Music is such an emotional generator, isn't it? You probably felt a lot of things. I really purposefully chose that music so we would feel the joy of the funky bluesy gospel thing, and then we would feel that the way that a love song just makes your heart melt and makes you feel all those feelings, and maybe it brought up some grief or sadness, or it just wakens the emotional body. So being an emotional being is really a magnificent thing. It's a magnificent part of us. And we are deeply feeling beings, and that's part of why we are so beautiful. We can feel so much in a day. And so whether we like what we're feeling or we dislike what we're feeling, I think we should be extremely sweet to ourselves. Extremely sweet, especially when things are stirred up, right? Okay, so I gotta sit. On that note, I'm gonna be sweet to myself. Can you still see me? Yes. So speaking of emotional, when things are stirred up, so it was such a fluke to injure my knee on Thursday night. I was just in a friend's house, and I wasn't as mindful as I should have been, and I ran into the edge of a hard table, and I just hit right where I had tore my ACL 6 years ago. So I think it's just strained, and I am making my way back, and I'm just really listening to my body. But this initial injury happened on Christmas Eve, just 6 weeks after the Paradise Fire. After my house burned down in the fire, the whole town burned down in the fire. And I was walking outside. I was staying in Mount Shasta at Chuck's, and I was walking outside, and I forgot, the light was out, and I forgot that last step. So I had a really bad fall. And it took about 9 months to get to where I wasn't limping anymore, and just to heal without surgery. And during that time, I started noticing everyone with a limp, everyone on crutches, right? Everyone with a walker, and especially everyone in a wheelchair. And I just had this immense compassion grow. I felt like I'm in this new club of people that I don't think I had noticed quite enough, and I didn't fully understand their experience. And all of a sudden, I just had so much compassion. And like everybody, like I noticed them, I'd talk to them, whoever it was, if they're in a walker or if they're on crutches, and we talk about what we're dealing with, you know, and it just really grew my compassion. And I actually feel my compassion growing wider now. I think sometimes we need a compassion tune-up. We might forget, you know, that feeling of just this really present compassion in our hearts. And then we get a compassion tune-up. One of the things that Judith talks about, and we don't need to get injured to do that. Just want to say that. But we can use it. It's like compost. You grow, right? You use it to grow, right? What would a garden be without compost? So we use it to grow. Judith talks about the 4 components, and I mentioned them last week, of emotional freedom, and they are biology of your emotions. That's tuning into your body. What is your body telling you about what you're feeling? Or what is your body telling you? Like for me, it's telling me to rest. It's telling me slow down. It's okay to be still and put your leg up and read and just be home. The other component is the spiritual meaning. And the third component is the energetic power of what you're going through. And then the fourth is the psychology of your emotions. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like this injury is healing really fast. And, you know, I overdid it Friday, and then my biology said, Saturday, you better just stay home and do nothing. And it gave me a chance to invite friends. Like Anna brought me my printing, and Chuck brought me my dinner, and Zan watered my flowers, brought me my water for my flowers. And, you know, that's another thing that it really helped me see, is how precious kindness and concern from others is. You know, just to realize a precious, simple act of helping is just so precious. And, you know, especially when it's a little inconvenient, you know, it makes it even more precious. You know, I know that some, you know, that Anna had bathed and was ready for bed when she brought my printing over. So it was just really touching. There's a Yiddish proverb, we plan, God laughs. And if you want to make God laugh, tell her your plans, right? So I had reserved an Airbnb tomorrow and the next day in Mount Shasta, and I was going to do all my favorite hikes, right? So now I've reassessed my plans, and I just hope to get to the edge of a lake and jump in and float a lot. And that's quite enough, right? So patience. Patience is really, I hadn't planned on talking about that, but this book, Emotional Freedom, is so powerful. It's 7 transformations, and one of them is from frustration, from disappointment, to building patience. Yeah, and I think patience is very underrated as a really important spiritual quality. It doesn't mean passivity, it doesn't mean resignation, it's power. And it's an emotionally freeing practice of waiting and watching and knowing when to act. Every world religion sees patience as a way to know God and as a quality of love, right? 1 Corinthians, the very first word to describe love is, thank you, patient. So let's take a patience survey, shall we? Okay, this is fun. Okay. Let's just see where we are on the scale of patience versus frustration and impatience. So ask yourself, you can answer out loud or not, but am I often frustrated and irritable? Do I typically respond to frustration by snapping at or blaming others? Do I self-medicate letdowns with alcohol, drugs, or junk food? You're all so quiet. Ooh, a hush fell over the room. I like sitting down. I feel more relaxed. Do my reactions hurt other people's feelings, right? When I'm disappointed, do I often feel unworthy or like giving up, right? So Judith offers ways to grow patience, and one is a practice to do while you're waiting in a long line. She says, instead of getting irritated, which stresses, it taxes our system with stress hormones, take a breath and tell yourself, I'm going to wait peacefully and enjoy the pause. I'm going to wait peacefully and enjoy the pause. I've been practicing this long line thing for a while, and what I do is I chant my mantra that Alma gave me, and that is Om Shrim Karunaye Namaha, which means it means victory to the compassionate mother. So I'm calling forth the compassionate mother of myself. So if I'm calling forth, I'm chanting my mantra to be more compassionate and merge with the compassionate mother, I can't very well be irritated at a slow cashier, right? It's just incongruent. It's Om, well, it's my personal mantra, but I'll share it with you. It's Om Shrim Karunaye Namaha. Karuna is compassion. So the 4 antidotes to growing patience. The first one is when things aren't happening fast enough, realize that there's your timetable and Spirit's timetable. And learn to trust flow. Learn to trust flow. You know, that a larger than self-intelligence carries us through life. And it asks us to pace ourselves. And we can attune to that flow. We can attune to that flow. The second thing is, say you don't get what you want, right? I didn't want to be hurt. Or you get what you don't want, right? I didn't want to be hurt, right? But it builds patience and self-compassion. It builds self-compassion as well. Because we can learn to be kind to ourselves and say, Precious, that's my nickname for myself, I know you're bummed, but this one thing fell through and it'll be okay. It'll be okay. Judith says disappointments may actually be blessings in disguise. And I remember when I was deciding whether to stay in Lake Tahoe one more year, back in 2023, early 2023. And, you know, most of the congregation really wanted me to stay, and I was deciding. But there was one board member that was insisting I had to move there. I had to move there because I had a place to stay there, but I also had a place in Ashland to be near my mom. And thank goodness, because it was her last year. And so, you know, I intuited that. I knew to be near her as much as possible and also do that job. But anyway, they insisted I move there, and it was kind of a reason I decided, no, I'm not going to stay. And at the time, it just felt a little unappreciative, I guess, maybe a little ungrateful in some ways to me to have them set that ultimatum and not understand my life situation. But anyway, in hindsight, it was such a blessing. It was the nudge. It was the nudge that got me out of there and created space in my life. And then I had these months to just sit in Ashland and go, what next? And I did an audition in band, and I went, that is not it. And my heart just kept saying, this is it. You have to take this leap, and you have to try this. Unity of Ashland is waiting. Unity community of Ashland is waiting. And so I'm so grateful for that nudge. And I see that. A lot of times you don't see it till way later. How, the Dalai Lama, he says, remember that sometimes not getting what you want is a wonderful stroke of luck. It's true. There's unexpected hidden blessings and positive outcomes if we trust what life is bringing. So when you notice the energy of frustration, how does it feel? Tell me how it feels. Frustration, tense, irritable, stuck, prickly. Yeah. Disappointing, restless. What else? Angry. Yeah, what else? Serious, heavy, frayed at the edges, tiring, right? Trapped in your head? Sad. Yeah, sad. And it's really, you're not feeling in your intuition. Whereas patience, okay, how does patience feel? Expansive, peaceful, relaxed. What? Ah! Who said that? Patience is not boring. All right, it can be boring to you. I accept that. How else is patience? It's feeling appreciative. It's feeling generous. Like there's enough time for someone, right? There's enough time for someone. It's like a big, slow exhale, right? It's soft. It's embracing. It's spiritually on center. Calm. Yes. Nice. Allowing. Love that word. Acceptance. Yes. Fluid like water. Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. Flowing. So we can change what we tell ourselves about what's disappointing, right? And we can choose a narrative that makes peace with what's happening. We don't want to let 10 minutes of frustration create a whole day of frustration. Do you know what I mean? You know how that can happen? It's because of the story, right? It's not because of that frustrating thing is still happening. It's the story that you're repeating, right? And the energy you're holding versus letting go of. So we learn to notice the energy in our feeling body and breathe and self-soothe and intentionally re-choose happiness for ourselves. We get to be a master at that. So I briefly mentioned the 4 emotional types last week, and Judith talks about 4 in her work, and they are the intellectual, the empath, the rock, and the gusher. I don't know why everybody laughs when I say the gusher. I think I used to be a gusher, but we'll get to that. But so I'm going to describe them and see where you fit. And again, it's kind of like, it's not to put ourselves in a box. It's kind of like the Enneagram types. It's just to see, what your type is to better understand yourself. A lot of times it's what we revert to when we're under duress. It's like our factory setting, I would say. So let's begin with the intellectual. The intellectuals, they are bright, articulate, they're analysts, they're most comfortable in the mind, and these folks tend towards a cerebral approach to emotions. And when stress hits, they often take refuge in their head as the first line of coping, and their world is filtered through rational thought. And they, are often scientists and doctors and teachers and accountants and really anyone who's predominantly focused on mental pursuits. And because they are often locked in their heads, it can be like pulling teeth to get them to share about their feelings, to get them to share their feelings. And in part because for many of them, they don't know how to not think and be in their feeling nature. And that has a lot to do with conditioning and disposition. So to get a sense if we're an intellectual type, I'm going to give you another little survey. You can ask yourself, do I believe I can think my way to any solution? Am I uncomfortable when people get highly emotional? When presented with a problem, do I start analyzing the pros and cons rather than noticing how it makes me feel? Do I prefer planning to being spontaneous? If we sense that this is our type, or it's partly our type, then our work is to balance mind and intuition, to bring in more intuition so we can become more whole. I remember my dad. I remember feeling that my dad was this type, the intellectual type. I remember one time when I was 19, I got Dad to go on a trip with me, and I had this plan. I was gonna, share all these feelings and get him to share all these feelings, and we're gonna have this incredible bonding time, and so we flew to Puerto Rico, and poor Dad, like every lunch and dinner and walk, it's like, so Dad, how do you feel? And I really feel deeply about this, and oh my gosh, my dad was just tortured by the whole thing. And it, to be fair, it was just because I didn't really know him that well. I was mostly raised by my mom, and I wanted to get to know him. And I knew he loved me, but he expressed it through like buying me things. He expressed it through material things. So boy, he was so glad when we got back from that trip. And but it was the beginning of me understanding him more and really understanding this was his type, that he felt deeply, but he just wasn't comfortable emotionally expressing. And his type was the intellect. And to be fair, it's really how that generation was raised. It's very much the generational conditioning. Men were brought up, boys don't cry, right? And they don't show their feelings. And so the way that I did know Dad deeply felt and was actually a deeply feeling being is when he'd come see me sing. And then I would sing a love song and I would see his eyes water. The Rose, that always got him. That was his favorite song. So the upside to the intellectual is they have a great sense of logic and they can keep calm in emotionally heated situations. And that's actually very, very useful. They're comfortable in the world of ideas. They can debate well. The downside is they may live from the neck up and have difficulty connecting to their feelings or another's feelings. And they may seem emotionally cold or withholding. They may have a hard time being playful. They may believe in spirituality, but be hard-pressed to feel it more deeply in their soul. So for this type, Judith, she gives all kinds of guidance in the book, and I'm just briefly sharing that she talks about finding balance, and she encourages the intellects to learn how to empathize. That's really key in emotional freedom. And she asks them to consider, how can I respond from my heart, not just my head? How can I respond from my heart, not just my head? And before offering solutions, see if you can get to, I know how you're feeling. I know how you're feeling. And being able to sincerely say that, right? I know how you're feeling. Because that drops us into the heart. And that really, it melts tension. So the second type is the empath. The empaths are highly sensitive. They're finely tuned instruments when it comes to emotions. They feel everything, sometimes to an extreme, and they are less apt to intellectualize feelings. And intuition is the filter through which they experience the world. So this is definitely my type. I just relate to this. I live much more by intuition than thinking. I feel like my thinking mind, all those years of meditation, it's turned off, and something is living me. I think that's the way I would describe intuition. You are lived by life. You know, it's like a sixth sense, intuition. So empaths are naturally giving, they're spiritually attuned, and they're good listeners. If you want heart, empaths have it, and they're there for you, and they're world-class nurturers. They're usually in the helping profession. But the challenge for them is they tend to take on people's feelings like sponges. I see you nodding. Yeah, if they're around peace and love, it's wonderful, and they flourish. But if they're around negativity or toxic energy, it's like an assault. It's very exhausting. So the work of an empath is to learn to protect their sensitivity and find balance. So let's take an empath quiz. We'll take a little survey to know if you're an empath. Ask yourself, have I been labeled as too emotional or overly sensitive? If a friend is distraught, do I start feeling it too? Are my feelings easily hurt? Am I emotionally drained by crowds or require time alone to recover? And do my nerves get frayed by noise or smells or excessive talk? Yeah, if you answer yes to even a few of those, you're at least part empath. So empaths have these systems that are permeable, and the upside is they have this huge heart, and they're just so great at helping others. And they're very intuitive about people's thoughts and feelings, and they're in touch with their body and their emotions. They have a palpable sense of spirituality. The downside is they too easily absorb negativity, people's negativity. One woman described to Judith in a session that she felt like God created her with a window he left open, right? Like you just have this open window and you just, everything comes in, too much comes in. And empaths have a really challenging time with what's happening in the world today because there's a lot happening. And if you feel everything, oh my goodness, it can be really overwhelming. So what empaths have to learn is how to open and close that window depending on your emotional needs. And, being highly sensitive, you can be prone to anxiety, depression, and fatigue. Sometimes people have a lot of chronic physical symptoms that are empaths. So we have to find balance and enlist the intellect. So a key thing that Judith says to remember is, it's not my job to take on the emotions of others. Can you repeat that? It's not my job to take on the emotions of others. Can you feel that? I can be loving without doing so. I can be loving without doing so. Yeah, yeah. And that's having healthy boundaries. It's important to allow quiet time to emotionally decompress. That's why I live the way I do. I have so much silence. I have so much space in my days. And take calming mini breaks are so important throughout the day. Breathing fresh air, being in nature, stretching, meditation, walks. So empaths, we have to learn how to honor our needs by learning to safeguard our sensitivities. If someone asks too much of you, you can politely tell them no. Did you know that no is a complete sentence? Yeah, no, the AI tells you that when you're typing, right? No is a complete sentence. No, period. I've had to learn this skill because when I first became a minister, they just can't really teach you in seminary how to be a minister. And my first year at Oroville, 2017, I just thought I had to be like Jesus Christ every day. I just had to be just pure love and just give out and never run out, right? And so I found myself, I had office hours, and I just found myself pretty drained after a while because I am empathic. I have a lot of love, and people just came and they thought, oh, she's always available, right? So I just wore myself out, and then I learned all about self-care, right? And I really, as a minister, it's a whole nother thing. So I really learned a lot about self-care. So that's a really important piece with empaths. And to realize you're no use to anyone if you're burnt out, if you're drained, if you're out of balance, right? There's a chapter in Judith's book on emotional vampires, and to me it's a bit of a harsh term, but she does have great teachings and insight on how some people are simply not aware of their energy and how their energy affects others or how it drains others. So a lot of people don't realize their behavior is draining or exhausting. And it doesn't make them a bad person. It just makes them a person that needs to become more aware of how they affect others, right? And so we learn to not sacrifice ourselves. I mean, this could be like a 6-part series, really. But we learn to not sacrifice ourselves to make someone happy. We overcome being the people pleaser. Anybody learning about that? It's part of healthy boundaries. And there's a visualization she gives in the book where we just surround ourselves, especially for going out in public, with this protective shield. And we just imagine we're just enveloped in this cocoon of white light from head to toe, and it's creating this buffer zone, and it minimizes exposure to negative emotions. So there's so much more to say, but once again, I ended up with 70 pages, and I'm going to give a part 3 the week after next. Next week we have Anna, but then the last Sunday of this month I'll give a part 3, because I want to tell you about the 3rd and 4th. I want to tell you about the rock and the gusher. The gusher is really fun. It's fun to talk about. The drama queen. But for this week, I just invite you to explore your relationship with patience. Explore your relationship with how you meet setbacks and disappointments, and how you can grow in trusting the flow of what life is bringing, even if it slows you down, right? And consider if you do relate to these 2 emotional types, the intellect or the empath. I'd love to hear how you feel. So we want to grow. We want to grow in our emotional connections, our emotional expression, and take good care of our emotional body. Stay in balance so we can be our most beautiful self in this world. So let us be inner peace activists. That's what I've decided. I'm going to be an inner peace activist. I'm going to take this time with my knee to become a really, really fantastic inner peace activist. Because our emotional well-being, it's not only good for us, it's good for the world. It brings more well-being to all. The more peace we enjoy, the more that energy ripples out to everyone. So may you and may all your relations and all beings be at peace and be happy. Thank you.